It feels like on these two issues that we talk about consistently in the national news, abortion and gun rights, gun safety, whatever you want to call it, they are issues that Americans are fired up about, that they are voting on, that they are talking about, and that I think more urgently than anything, that they feel viscerally, because they shudder to think of what a 6-year-old's casket looks like, right? They shudder to think about what would happen to their child who was forced to get an illegal abortion or not, or carry a pregnancy to term that this person wasn't ready for. I mean, these are issues that people feel in their souls, right? And Republicans, I want to say unwittingly, because it almost seems like political suicide, but they have made a calculated path to drive their party towards these two issues in particular and be really on the wrong side of not only history, but where the public is at. And I think that the Democratic Party could literally exist on only, really honestly, you could have a party that just focused on abortion and gun rights, and you'd have 70% of the country with you.
That's right.
Do you sense any disagreement inside the Republican Party about where the GOP has landed on these two issues? Do you sense, and moreover, do you sense any movement? Do you think that this is going to wake anybody up in Congress?
I think it will. I don't know about in Congress. I think it'll wake people up around the country. But I think that their heels are dug in on these two issues. You know, fight for the Second Amendment no matter what, and, be against abortion. They're dug in on those issues. I would add one other issue to the two you just mentioned, the issue of inequality.
Sure.
That's another issue because people are struggling with poverty. People can't afford to live.
They feel that viscerally as well.
They can't afford housing. They can't afford to exist or breathe, right? And so that is another issue. They're on the wrong side of all those issues. What I would also say is this. Democrats, we have to look at the Tennessee Three, look at them and be inspired by their leadership. And we need to do the same thing in state houses across the country and in Congress, because many of my colleagues, I love them, but they're way too polite and they're way too focused on decorum, and they're not as loud and they don't push back as hard as we need to push back on this issue and all of the other issues. We have to take back our country and be very loud in how we do that. When the people see us fighting, they'll come out and vote in the elections, the ones who are staying home, because they'll finally see, oh, my God, these people care about me and my child.
Yeah, I think that there are some people, when you talk about being too polite, who will say getting louder, oh, what we need in American politics is for more, camaraderie. We need everybody to lower the volume. I mean, I would argue that Joe Biden, in some ways, was the person who made that case running for office in 2020. And at the same time, I think it's really dangerous to suggest that the volume is for equal reasons, right? The volume on the right, the insurrection at the Capitol, the tendency towards revolution has not anything to do with any particular principle. It has to do with power. It has to do with the loss of power, a loss of relevance, and fundamentally a grievance, right? That's not what's happening on the left. And I think it's probably really important for Democrats to make the case that the reason the megaphones are held aloft and the reason the volume's getting turned up is because you're talking about caskets and bodies and survival, right?
That's right.
It's not about Donald Trump staying in office. It's not about being angry about demographic change. It's about survival. And I guess, as you as a progressive, as you're out there and you see the right try and co-opt a lot of the energy, right, from the left, how do you keep making that distinction that what you're doing is not the same as what they're doing?
Because we actually are trying to uphold the ideals of the Constitution. That's what we are trying to do. We are also paying attention to what the hell is going on in our districts. A 14-year-old kid was shot at 10:30 in the morning in the chest and killed in my district in Mount Vernon. A 14-year-old, shortly after I got into office, OD'd on opioids and died in another part of my district in Yonkers. A 17-year-old was shot in the head and killed outside of his high school in the Bronx in my district. Another 16-year-old was killed in New Rochelle by a ghost gun by someone who was 16 years old. That's the reality of America. It's not just in my district, it's all over the country. And there are many reasons for that. They claim to say, Republicans claim to say it's about the individual. Well, they ain't doing nothing to help the individuals.
Yeah.
They claim it's about fatherlessness and poverty. They're not doing nothing to address poverty. They claim it's about mental health. They ain't doing nothing to address mental health either. So they go to all these other reasons why we have gun violence. They're not doing nothing about that, nor are they doing anything about the assault weapons and other common sense gun control laws. Also, it's not just the NRA. There are big money actors in politics that influence legislation way too much, that fund Democrats and Republicans. And that needs to stop. So people refer to me as a progressive. I'm just a regular person trying to fight for the rights of the people in my district, period. And when you poll these issues, whether it's healthcare, housing, education, climate, guns, abortion, the majority of the American people are on our side with these issues. And so, again, this is a call to action for everyone who cares about justice and equality and wants to move forward with a politics of love for all people. That's what this is about.
I got to say, you know, those children who died were their children, too. Those Republicans, they were children.
That's right.
They were the children of the state that was represented by Republicans and Democrats, and only one party is moving forward to make sure those deaths weren't in vain. Congressman Jamal Bowman, thank you so much for your time and for your work. We appreciate it.